That would have been so good. Okay, good. You got the recording. Tonight we're going to talk about exercise. They both start with a vowel, though, so that's neat. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay, I have a ton of information to share, and I don't want to just bombard you with too much. I just don't want to get in the weeds too much, but I really have some feelings, some strong feelings about exercise, and so I want to just be able to help you see how awesome it is and how beneficial it is, and especially for the women. I know we have a couple husbands on here, so that's good, and I want you to stay listening in. But for the four of us girls, I think that's how many of us are here right now. It looks like, oh, Mary's here too. Good. Okay, so we're probably kind of spread through a handful of decades of life. So we've probably got maybe 20s. I don't know how old you are, Claire, but at least 30s, 40s, 50s, some 20s. And Kelly, I don't know how old you are either, but I think we've got a good wide range here of girls. So no matter, I just want to make sure we know, no matter where we are in life, we can all benefit from what we're gonna talk about tonight. So I'm gonna kind of go quick through my slides and just hit the highlights and not really get too deep in it, because I'm hoping to make this relevant to those of us who are here. So if there's something that you see that you want to go back and talk about, then let me know and we can go back to a slide, but I'm just going to go through the slides, hit the pertinent information, and then we can have a discussion about how it applies to each of us individually, because there's only a handful of us here, so we can really work on that on an individual level. Okay, so we're talking about movement and why movement is so important. Sometimes when we talk about exercise, we get kind of a negative connotation, or maybe that leaves a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. I don't know. Some of us love exercise, some of us don't love it. I personally love to move my body, but it's also kind of a love-hate thing, right? Sometimes it's really hard to get myself up to go do the work, I guess, that I know I need and want to do, but I'm always so happy and glad that I put in the effort. And even like I said earlier, I didn't have a perfect week of exercise this week, and some of my workouts were shorter than I wanted them to be, and some of my lifting was just only one or two things, but I was grateful that I made the effort and just did something, because I am a firm believer that something is better than nothing. So I want you to remember that. Yeah, so also important to know that I really like this quote. We don't stop exercising because we grow old. We grow old because we stop exercising. I work in a clinic with older folks who get medication for arthritis and some other chronic diseases. And I was having a really good conversation today with one of my clients, and she said, it's really hard. It's hard for me to keep moving, but I know that if I stop, then I'm going to stop. She's 69. She's not quite 70 yet. And I think she's really a pretty active lady. But we had a great conversation about how movement is so important and helps us to continue moving. So don't stop moving. We don't stop exercising because we grow old. We grow old because we stop exercising. That's kind of going to be our theme for tonight. Okay. So because we're mostly female here, I want to tie in how our hormones affect our bodies and how they are affected by movement and exercising. So most important hormones that we as women focus on are estrogen, mostly estrogen, but also progesterone and testosterone. So men and women have all three hormones, and they are all important to men, male and female. But they play different roles, and we have those hormones in different levels according to our gender, of course. And so I'm going to talk about specifically why sometimes our hormones get a bad rap, but how they affect specifically brain, bone, our heart, and our metabolism. Okay, let's move along. Oops, I got to go back. My little arrow key gets a little excited sometimes. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, all critically important and all act on different areas of our body, specifically, like I said, our brain, heart. We know the reproductive side as women. We get that pretty obviously throughout our life. But our bones and heart and brain, we don't always think about as much. And while we are in our childbearing years and really even perimenopausal years and postmenopausal years, those hormones do so much to protect us. They give us heart health. They keep our vessels relaxed and flexible. They can help control our cholesterol levels. They are super important in bone density. And that's something that I really want to hit on tonight, why it's so important for exercise and bone density. They regulate our mood. They regulate our sleep. They help us to have immunity, and really important also to build muscle mass. Okay, good. I don't have to click on that. So as we get older, when Claire doesn't have to worry about this too much right now, but like I always have liked exercise, and 30s, even really early 40s for me, no big deal. And then I don't know, mid 40s, mid to late 40s, bam. Those of you who have already been there know exactly what I'm talking about. Perimenopause hits, our estrogen levels start to drop, and it kind of wreaks havoc in our bodies. And osteoporosis for our bones, Alzheimer's for our brain, we have cardiovascular disease, we have insulin resistance. All of these things are affected by our estrogen. And so as estrogen levels in our body starts to drop, our risk for those chronic diseases goes up. So I'm not going to stay on this one too long, but it's kind of a cascade effect. So the more that our estrogen levels drop as we go through this 10-ish year period of perimenopause, the more our risk factors go up. But the good news is that exercise can stop that cascade effect. And so if anybody wants to talk about that more in detail, I'm happy to talk about how hormones affect everything specifically. But really the point that I'm trying to make is that our hormones affect those 4 areas of our body specifically, but so does exercise. And it has an incredible impact, especially as we age, for longevity. So we're going to spend some time talking about different kinds of exercise and how each of the different kinds of exercise impacts our brain and our bones and our heart, and each of the ways that exercise, can help where estrogen starts to, when we start to lose estrogen, where it starts to fail us. So 4 pillars of exercise, kind of 3, but I've divided it out into 4. So resistance training is strength training, and you probably hear a lot about that right now. Aerobic base and intensity. So intensity and aerobics, this is what you would call interval training over here. Your VO2 max and your zone 2, those are both cardio. So when we talk about cardio, there's a couple kinds of ways that we can increase our cardiovascular fitness. And one of them is zone 2, one of them is VO2 max interval work, and we'll talk more about what those are. Both very important. And then the 4th pillar that I think is equally important, and especially as we age, is mobility. And that's going to be flexibility and balance and keeping our joints moving. And this is all of these things combined, but mobility is the difference between falling and getting back up again and falling and breaking a hip. So as we age, all of these pillars are important, and we're going to talk a little bit about each one and describe what they are. I just threw this graphic in here, and you can come, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you can come back and look at it later. It's a really good graphic explaining why we need all of those components, essentially, right? Why it's important to have a good balance of all 4 components, and why a good training, what we're going to call training for life, a good training program is going to include strength and mobility and cardiovascular training. So come back to that one when you have some time and want to do a little light reading. Okay, let's start with strength training. So I feel like strength training is one of the most important things that you can do to build muscle, and muscle helps to improve metabolic function. So it improves the way that your cells function. And there's a lot of stuff that we could have a whole class just on strength training because there's so many things about it that are important. But if I could just have you remember one thing, it's that please don't be afraid to lift weights. For a long time, I feel like women had this there's been tradition and culture that women aren't supposed to be in the weight room and that we need to avoid heavy weightlifting. And maybe that's because of, like I said, because of culture and tradition. And maybe we've been taught for a lot of years that cardio is the way to burn calories and that women should be small. And so we need to burn calories to get smaller. It's because we were scared of bulking up, or we were scared of getting hurt, or this cultural view of women being weak or frail. But we are meant to be strong. Girls, we're meant to be strong, and it's okay to be strong. And so I just don't want you to be afraid of when I say strength training. Don't think that you're going to go bulk up and be this masculine body type. This is strength for life. This is, again, the difference between getting up off of the floor or breaking a hip. So muscle is so important. One of the most important topics that I want to just outline here is what's called progressive overload. And if you've spent much time in a gym, you know what that means. But essentially, this means that you don't lift the same amount of weight all the time. You're either increasing the weight that you're lifting or you're increasing the reps that you're lifting, and you're continually lifting a little heavier, a little heavier, a little heavier. Now, that's not linear. That doesn't mean it always goes straight up in a linear fashion. But over time, you don't keep lifting your 5-pound dumbbells, but over time, you're able to do that heavier and heavier. And after a while, maybe you work up to 10-pound dumbbells, and maybe you work up to 15-pound dumbbells. There's a lot that we can talk about there. And if you have specific questions about it, do some research. We can have another chat about it. But progressive overload is really important in strength training because your muscles can't grow if you don't stress them. Muscles grow by being torn apart, essentially, and they get stronger and bigger when they heal. The growth comes in recovery. So if you don't put enough stress on them, then they don't grow. So progressive overload just means that essentially over time you're increasing the load or the volume that you're lifting. Compound movements, if you don't know what those are, compound movements are movements that include more than one joint. So if you just do a bicep curl, you're just only moving your elbow and you're working one muscle. If you do a squat, you're moving your hips, you're moving your ankles, you're moving your knees, and that is a compound movement. So there's deadlifts, squats, presses going over your head. There's different kinds of presses. And so there's different movements that are compound movements. So focus on those compound movements for the majority of your lifting, and you'll get the biggest bang for your buck. And then as far as mechanical loading goes, bone is another way that lifting, okay, I should say this differently. Strength training and lifting heavy weights is the best thing that you can do for your bone health. So as you stress bone, similar to muscle, but as you stress bone, it lays down layers of new bone. And so bones actually get stronger when they're under stress. So things like riding a bike or going swimming are good cardiovascular exercises. Those are good for your lungs, but they're not going to help your bones. And lifting weights will do more to help prevent osteoporosis, especially if you can do it the earlier, the better. But even if you're lifting in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you're still going to set yourself up for success when it comes to bone density. So just remember that physical stress on the bone will strengthen it. and that will help with osteoporosis. And when I say lift heavy, that's relative to you. 5 pounds might be heavy for you. Maybe 50 pounds is. I don't want to stress anybody out when I say lift heavy. And that's where I want to have some time in a little while to talk about this together. But excuse me, lifting heavy for you is what's important, because we're all different. And so whatever is relative to you and whatever is heavy to you, that's where we want to be. All of these things over here, all amazing benefits of lifting weights. And you can go back and look at those in a little bit. So that's strength training. If you can't tell, I'm a really big fan of strength training, and I think you should be too. It's really important. Okay, I also do think cardiovascular training is important, because your heart needs to be strong so that it can carry you into old age, especially VO2 max. And what VO2 max is the amount of this, it's a measurement of the amount of oxygen that your blood can move, essentially the amount of oxygen that you can use when you are doing physical activity. So this is like your horsepower. The higher the number your VO2 max is, the better your heart and lungs and muscles are at creating energy. And high VO2 max numbers right here are directly correlated with a lower risk of heart disease, with a lower risk of stroke, with a lower risk of Alzheimer's. Actually, essentially, the higher your VO2 max, the lower your risk of all-cause mortality. And there are multiple studies to show that the higher this number is, the better your heart works and the better chance you have of surviving life for as long as possible. So there's different ways to test your VO2 max. Some people might have a wearable. Some people might go get a VO2 max test. You can go run on a treadmill. You've probably seen like people running on a treadmill with a mask, and they're over there running away on the treadmill. And that's one way to do it. And I think that's an awesome thing to do if anybody wants to go get their VO2 max tested. But your Apple Watch or your Garmin or different things like that will also give you a pretty good estimation. And really, we're just looking for trends, right? You want to do work that's going to help you increase that number, because that will turn back your biological age. It will kind of turn back the clock of time for you. So this doesn't have to be stressful. You don't have to go out and run wind sprints at the high school track. There's a lot of ways that you can increase your VO2 max. But the idea is that you work hard and get your heart rate high for a specific amount of time, and then you bring it down, and then you raise it back up, and then you bring it down. So we're talking some sort of interval training there. If you have ever gone to a CrossFit class, you know that some of those Metcons are awesome VO2, built-in VO2 interval training. So, but that's something that you can do on your treadmill, on a bike at home. You can do it running. It doesn't have to be stressful. It just needs to be some sort of like this, 30 seconds on, a couple, 2 or 3 minutes of recovery. Or I like to do a 4x4x4. So you work hard for 4 minutes, then you walk for 4 minutes, and then you do that 4 times. So some sort of modality in here. Honestly, there are so many ways that you can structure that, but some sort of intervals are going to give you a massive return on investment. So that's something that you can work into your exercise routine, maybe once a week even. It doesn't have to be super frequent, but if you can do something like that once a week, you'll be way ahead of the game. So that brings us over here to zone 2 training, building an aerobic base. And that's where you want to spend 80% of your time doing cardio is in that zone 2. Maybe you guys have heard of like Orange Theory or heart rate zones or something. This is where you're working at like 60 to 70-ish% of your heart rate. You can talk through this type of exercise, but it's kind of hard, and sometimes you might feel like it's too easy, but if you can spend a good chunk of time there, that's where you can really build the endurance that your heart needs then to complement the VO2 max. So a good easy thing that you could do here is go for a walk, and then or if you're on a treadmill or on a bike or something, maybe spend 30 minutes or 45 minutes in a zone 2. So you're not just strolling along Sunday stroll, but you're not running either, unless that's where your level of fitness is. But you're moving along at a good pace. And then at the end of that, you do maybe, I don't know, 5 sets of 30 seconds really hard, and then a couple minutes of walking, 30 seconds really hard. So you can combine those two together. Again, VO2 max doesn't have to be done more than once, maybe twice a week, depending on what your goals are. But these two together make up the ways that you can really strengthen your heart and give your heart a huge jump start, not even a jump start, just a really good foundation, and build that muscle to carry you through your later years. Okay, so that was strength, cardiovascular training, and now mobility. So this is going to be anything that has to do with flexibility or balance or keeping your joints healthy. Things like yoga, Tai Chi, Pilates. This is going to be stretching or just warm-ups. Getting on and off the ground is really amazing. I know we do burpees sometimes, or we do Turkish get-ups, if either of those things ring a bell. Like literally getting on the floor, laying down, and then standing back up. That is really amazing exercise, because that's what we want to be able to do for years and years, for our whole life, right? And all of this work has massive benefit when it comes to, I've already talked about falls 3 times, when it comes to reducing chronic pain in your joints, when it keeps your neurons firing. One thing I like to do is stand on one foot while I'm brushing my teeth. So 1 minute on one side, 1 minute on the other side. And then if I'm feeling really frisky, I close my eyes while I'm doing it. And then I tip over usually. But that's an awesome way to work on your balance. Just take a second while you're working in the kitchen or while you're doing anything and practice balance. Just stand there. And I think you should try that tonight. Practice standing on one foot with your eyes closed. Also video yourself, because it will be funny. So mobility, flexibility, very important. Really, really will help maintain your proprioception and your balance as we age. Okay, so this chart I just threw in here because I just took all of the different modalities of exercise, and there's more on there, but plyometrics is jump training, and that's where stressing our bones comes into play. So that can even just be like jumping jacks or jogging, or maybe you jump rope or something like that, but just a little bit of soft stress on your bones. That's what plyometrics or impact is. Excuse me. And then daily walking. There's many of us who have daily step goals. And so that, along with the cardio and strength and mobility, you can see which of these areas, so we have bone, brain, heart, and metabolic health, and which of the modalities benefit each of those different areas the most. So again, this is something that you can come back and look at later, but I really like this comparison chart because to me, it emphasizes that strength training up here has lots of stars for our bone, our brain, and our metabolism. And interval training has lots of stars for our brain and our heart and our metabolism. And you can see that those two are really important, but really everything on here, if you can find some way to work that into your weekly routine, you're going to see massive benefit, because look at all those stars. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you put this all together? Do not let this slide scare you. You're going to add that all up and you're going to be like, yeah, I don't have 16 workouts a week in me, because if I have to do 4 of this and 4 of this and 2 of this and 4 of that, there's no way. I don't want you to think you have to spend hours a day training. That's not what it boils down to. What it really comes down to is consistency and trying to get a little bit of something in consistently. Like I said earlier, not extreme training, but something is better than nothing. So I want to talk about how this looks for each of us. And maybe if you need help structuring your week, maybe you go on walks or runs one day, maybe you lift a couple times a week. And mobility and balance especially is best done in little doses. So don't think that that's like a whole hour right there. These things don't have to take up extreme amounts of time. But putting it all together is something that requires a little bit of art, but also we make it too complicated. So don't let it scare you. We can talk about that more when we get to the end here. Really what it boils down to is that, especially as women, we are training, we are moving our bodies and exercising, not because we want to be smaller, not because we want to take up less space, not because we want to lose weight, but because we need that exercise as protection. We need, because we lose estrogen as we age, we need that exercise to help increase the benefits that we lose when we lose estrogen. And exercise does a phenomenal job of providing those protections. On the last slide, I just have some resources. So if you want to look at that, lots of studies. There's so many studies to back all of this up. But yeah, I just am a huge believer in the benefit of exercise and moving our bodies and lifting some weights and improving our cardiovascular fitness. And so I would love to answer any questions. Actually, we'll just go to that point and then we can talk about any questions that you guys have.